I want to take you to Chicago now, where their news conference is being held regarding a police officer facing murder charges in the shooting death of a black teenager. That officer turned himself in this morning. Let's listen in.
Working with a partner in a marked patrol car assigned to the overnight shift in the Chicago Police Department's 8th District. The circumstances leading up to the shooting that evening began at 9:47 p.m. when a Chicago police dispatcher radioed to an 8th District beat car that a citizen was holding a male who had been caught breaking into trucks and stealing radios in a parking lot near 41st and Kildare. That male was later identified as Laquan McDonald. The radio dispatches were broadcast to all 8th District patrol units. At 9:53 p.m., a responding beat car related that the guy is walking away with a knife in his hand, and the dispatcher inquired as to whether any available units had a taser. Another beat car responded immediately that they were on their way, although they did not indicate whether or not they had a taser. 1 minute later, a responding officer radioed that the suspect was walking toward a nearby Burger King restaurant located on Pulaski Road. The dispatcher confirmed the location, reminded all units that the individual was armed with a knife, and they then continued to ask if the other units were in close proximity. At 9:56 p.m., one of the responding beat car officers radioed that the suspect had just used the knife to slash the tire on their squad car. Seconds later, beat car 845R radioed that they were 2 blocks away from the incident. Beat car 845R was the responding police unit in which Officer Van Dyke was a passenger. The squad was being driven by his partner. Seconds later, 2 additional police officers responded through radio transmissions that they were on their way as well. At that point, a total of 8 officers, including this defendant and his partner, had arrived on the scene in 4 vehicles to assist the officers who had the initial contact with Laquan. None of these officers were equipped with tasers. The dash camera of one of the responding beat cars captured the shooting, but no audio was recovered. Although some of the other responding units had operating dash cams, due to their positioning, they did not capture the actual shooting, nor do they contain audio recordings. Investigators recovered video from a local business that showed Laquan walking away from the initial officers at 40th Street. Attempts to download video from another local business were unsuccessful, but it was determined that the cameras at that location would not have captured the scene of the actual shooting. Finally, video from a 3rd local business was recovered, but due to the distance and obstructions, that video was deemed to be very limited evidentiary value. The dash camera video shows Laquan McDonald as he jogs south on Pulaski Road, passing the Burger King. At the 9:57:25 p.m., timestamp is on that video, the recording shows 2 other marked Chicago police SUVs on the scene. At that time, Laquan was walking, and as he passes one of the responding police units, he waves his right arm, and a knife is visible in his right hand. 5 seconds later, Officer Van Dyke and his partner park their vehicle and immediately draw their weapons. At that time, Laquan McDonald is approximately 1 foot from the white lane divider in the middle of Pulaski Road going southbound, and his body appears to be moving slightly away from the officers toward the west side of Pulaski. At 9:57:36, McDonald has crossed over the white lane divider away from the officers, and Officer Van Dyke has taken at least 1 step toward McDonald with his weapon drawn. The officer then opened fire on Laquan, whose arm jerks, his body spins around, and he falls to the ground. While Laquan is falling to the ground, the defendant takes at least 1 more step towards him, at which point the angle of the dash camera changes and we can no longer see the officer within the frame of the video. 2 seconds later, Laquan McDonald is lying in the street on his right side, and the video captures what appears to be 2 puffs of smoke coming from the ground near his body. These puffs of smoke were later identified as clouds of debris caused by the fired bullets. At 9:57:51, McDonald is still lying on the street, and the last visible shot is fired. In the 13 seconds that he has been on the ground, his body has jerked and his arm moved slightly. There have been 3 visible clouds of debris indicating shots hit the pavement near Laquan McDonald's body.
Right,
Approaches McDonald and kicks the knife out of his hand. The knife, later recovered by police, had a 3-inch blade that is folded into his hand, into the handle. Officer Van Dyke's partner reported that there were in the shots when he looked at Van Dyke and saw that he was preparing to reload his weapon. Officer Van Dyke's partner related that he could hear McDonald struggling to breathe, and he told Van Dyke to hold his fire so he could approach McDonald and kick the knife away. Officer Van Dyke was armed with a 9mm caliber semi-automatic pistol and had a 16-round capacity. Chicago police investigators later recovered 16 fired cartridge cases from the scene, and the Illinois State Police determined that all those cartridge cases had been fired from Officer Van Dyke's weapon. Our investigation has determined that Officer Van Dyke was on the scene for less than 30 seconds before he started shooting. In addition to the fact that all evidence indicates that he began shooting approximately 6 seconds after getting out of his vehicle. An analysis of the video establishes that 14 to 15 seconds passed from the time the defendant fired his first shot to clear visual evidence of a final shot. For approximately 13 of those seconds, Laquan was lying on the ground. On the right, of the 8 or more officers on the scene, it was only the defendant who fired his weapon. Laquan had a pulse at the time Chicago Fire Department paramedics arrived at the scene, but lost his pulse during transportation to Mount Sinai Hospital. Once at the hospital, life-saving efforts were unsuccessful, and he was pronounced dead. According to the interviews with officers on the scene, Laquan McDonald never spoke to the officers, never responded to their numerous verbal commands to drop the knife. The first responding officer stated that they did not see the need to use force against McDonald when they encountered him, and that he began running away towards Pulaski when sirens could be heard. Several civilians also witnessed the shooting. One was a motorist stopped in traffic on Pulaski when he saw McDonald walking in the street immediately before he was shot. The motorist described McDonald as looking for a way to get away from the police. The motorist stated that McDonald never moved toward, lunged at, or did anything threatening towards the officers before he was shot and fell to the ground. This witness stated that he heard a pause in the shots after McDonald fell to the ground, but then heard more shots. He also said that he did not see McDonald do anything threatening while lying on the ground that would cause the officer to continue to shoot. Based upon this and other evidence, it is my determination that this defendant's actions of shooting Laquan McDonald when he did not pose an immediate threat of great bodily harm or death, and his subsequent actions of shooting Laquan McDonald while he lay on the ground after previously being struck by gunfire were not justified, and they were not a proper use of deadly force by this police officer.